The crime scene, part 2. The crime scene technicians process the crime scene for physical evidence. It is their responsibility to identify, evaluate, and collect physical evidence from the crime scene for further analysis by a crime laboratory. The initial walkthrough is a quasi-search for physical evidence present at the crime scene. They note obvious items of evidence, and then a more efficient and effective search is performed for less obvious or overlooked items of evidence. Any new item of evidence is documented as described earlier. The goal of crime scene searches is to provide organization and a systematic structure to ensure no items of physical evidence are missed or lost. They find, collect, and preserve all physical evidence that might serve to recreate the crime and identify the perpetrator in a manner that will stand up in court. Such evidence that they look for are trace evidence, impressions, body fluids, hair and fibers, weapons and firearms evidence, and question documents. The crime scene searches must be thorough and systematic and must be conducted at once. No single method applies to all types of scenes. The crime scene technicians must recognize and adapt search methods that best suits the situation or scene. It is important to use established methods, otherwise it can produce mistakes and significant evidence can be missed. The most commonly employed search methods are geometric patterns. Inward or outward spirals are best used on crime scenes without any physical barriers, such as open water. This requires the ability to trace a regular pattern with fixed diameters, but it has limited application. The parallel line or strip method works best on large outdoor scenes and usually requires a search coordinator. The grid method or the modified double line search is effective but time-consuming. The quadrant or zone method is best used on scenes with defined zones or areas. It's effective in houses or buildings, and teams are assigned to small zones for searching. It can be combined with other methods. The link method is based on the linkage theory. It is the most common and the most productive. Usually one type of evidence leads to another. It is experiential, logical, and systematic. Works with large and small, and indoor and outdoor scenes. Each different item or similar items collected at different locations must be placed in separate containers. This prevents damage through contact and cross-contamination. Though there is no rigid order for collection of evidence, some types of evidence by their nature are given priority over order. Transient, fragile, or easily lost evidence should be collected first. If items are moved and new evidence is discovered, documentation must proceed immediately. Evidence should be submitted to the laboratory intact. Blood, hairs, fibers, soil particles, and other types of trace evidence should not be removed from garments, weapons, or other articles that bear them. Most items of evidence at a crime scene are packaged within a primary container, then placed inside a secondary container. Containers are completely sealed with tamper-resistant tape. The sealing tape or evidence tape must completely cover the opening and must be marked with the initials of the collector and date and time of the collection, information about the items contained, identification of the collector and the date, time, and location of the collection of the item. Living plants such as marijuana must be packaged in breathable containers such as paper bags. If it's packaged in airtight containers, they will rot and become useless. Wet blood or body fluids must be allowed to dry, or if packaged wet, container must be breathable. If it's airtight, the accumulation of moisture can encourage mold growth. Blood can be packaged in glass or plastic culture tubes that contains a preservative, ethylene diamine tetracetic acid, or EDTA. Clothing must be air dried and placed individually in separate paper bags to ensure air circulation and prevent mold and mildew formation. Wet paint must be allowed to dry or packaged in breathable containers. Trace evidence must be placed in an envelope or plastic baggie that is sealed on all sides. Do not use tape or glue because the glue can interfere with chemical analysis of the evidence, and evidence may be difficult to be removed from tape. A druggist fold or bindle can also be used, and then those are put into an envelope. If it's small amounts of powder, they are usually placed in a druggist fold and then in an envelope or baggie. Liquid or volatile items such as fire residue must be contained in airtight containers because the accelerant will evaporate in breathable containers. Continuity of possession or chain of custody must be established. Every person who handled or examined the evidence must be accounted for. Every individual who possesses the evidence must maintain a written record of its acquisition and disposition. Known standard or reference sample is usually obtained from the victim, suspect, or other known source. Such examples include substrate controls. which are materials close to areas where physical evidence has been deposited. In arson cases, if a surface has been suspected to be exposed to an accelerant, they collect a piece of the same surface material to not have been exposed to the accelerant. In blood-stained cases, unstained areas close to the stain sample is taken to see if material can interfere with the interpretation of lab results.